possible before, inevitable now. Another story. Once upon a time, there was a senator called Barack Obama who teamed up with a Republican called Tom Coburn to say we need a bill to require transparency in government. One senator secretly placed a hold, which, given the Senate rules, allows you to just table it forever, but not say who it is. So this conservative, this right-wing blog set out to people and say, go find out who that is. These are libertarian conservatives as opposed to hierarchists. And they basically said, go call your own senator, ask them, did you or didn't you, and then report back. And within 72 hours, they had collated answers to constituents, which is a very serious thing, lying to a constituent, that basically said, not me, not me, not me, not me, until they found Senator Ted Stevens. This was funnier during the period that Ted Stevens had been convicted of a crime, but now his conviction has been overturned, so it's less funny. And he was shamed into removing the hold, and then it moved forward. What's interesting for me is partly the spontaneous ad hoc nature of which a coalition suddenly forms around the practice, but also how this one-time event provides inspiration for a foundation to systematize this. So you've got a foundation like the Sunlight Foundation that has money and technologists to build systems that will now collect the inquiring capabilities and interests of citizens onto questions of corruption. So for example, here they're taking data from the budget bill and mashing it with geographic data from Google, so that essentially you, the citizen, can look and say, why on earth is there so much money in this particular thing for this particular, you can drill down into the project, and then you can go and try to investigate it. More than that, they're now building platforms that will harness people to do particular investigative tasks. So let's say that they found that there are about 6 databases that if you cross-reference all the data from all of them, you can find in this particular case which member of Congress paid their spouse out of campaign contribution funds, which is not illegal, it just stinks. And so then on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., they released this interface. By Sunday, they had all 535 members of Congress identified with exactly who paid what, by basically going, step 2, find this over here, plug it over into there. Step 3, do this. By step 6, you knew the answer. Another story. This was radical for what happened in party politics. You have different party politics here. In the United States, the parties are very weak because each of the candidates runs by themselves. And so what was happening here in 2006, the left was much more powerful in the blogosphere than the right. And what the left started to do was to try to bring to bear, this was basically a list of safe seats, senators and congressmen running without opposition, who had a lot of money in their campaign contributions. And this was a shaming list that said, hand over some of your money to the Democratic National Committee so that it can transfer the money to close races that need it, so that we can win a few more keys. Be more part of the party as opposed to just running for yourself. It worked, money was transferred, and the Democrats won more. Obama, when everybody talks about his fundraising campaign, not everybody, there's a big debate of how much Obama really innovated in the campaign structure, and how much what he did was a continuation of what was developing in the left-wing blogosphere. If you look at what Act Blue, which just raised money for candidates in various Congress places, completely unconnected to any campaign, just on the web, $87 million in the last campaign for Democratic candidates who were more to the left than otherwise was thought. So this is essentially the left wing of the Democratic Party organizing together in a very large scale and effective way. So these are just examples of effective organization along one domain that's very measurable. Let me skip a little bit because I want to get to some other things. We may or may not come back to this. Essentially what we're seeing is an emerging new ecosystem, because I'll come back to at least a couple of these. A few large commercial professional news organizations with global reach create some kind of a media sphere. But we also see distributed social action. We also see politically mobilized peer production platform like a new party press system. This is the daily cost, for example. The largest participatory blog in the political blogosphere, over 10,000 daily contributors, about 200,000 registered users, about the same readership as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution Service second-tier newspapers. Individual research and expression in networks clustered for mutual linking. I'll come back to this in detail. Low cost, low profit commercial models engaged with peer producers. That's basically what started out as a single blogger asking for tips and writing very, very high quality Josh Marshall turns out now to be a very substantial political news source operating on a tiny budget with 4 or 5 employees, but harnessing a lot of tips and contributions from initially just general users and now increasingly more sophisticated contributors who contribute as well. Non-profit increasing their efficacy because of lower costs and capacity to leverage distributed social action. So the internet democratizes, and its critique of everyone a pamphleteer starts out with the 1990s with a view of everyone a pamphleteer. This is a time when the study of the network in public sphere or the network politics is very much armchair anthropology. Both those who say, oh, it's like everyone a pamphleteer, and those like my colleague Cass Sunstein, who say, no, there's a Babel objection, there's fragmentation, nobody can hear what's saying. All of them are basically saying, here's what I think is happening. I'm as guilty as any of having done the same thing. This is just describing the state of moves. Theoretically, what you see here in this first generation objection is heavy focus on deliberation and rational decision making, emphasizing common goals and shared fate so that fragmentation of the debate becomes something that undermines the possibility of a democratic discourse. Not much discussion of organization, of salience, of conflict, none of power, and as I said, empirically armchair anthropology. Still in the armchair, some of the responses that I certainly was part of was to focus on the culture of web speech, on mutual linking, on the fact that people could read each other, the fact that there was this see for yourself kind of ethic. It's here are the documents, you read it, don't have to rely on me. And the fact that we had so many good search and aggregation capabilities like Dig, Technorati, Google News, etc., so that we weren't just there creating the daily me, but in fact we had fairly well organized structures. The other form of response to this that actually wasn't developed as a response, it was developed as a second generation critique, was the new observation tools of link analysis, the power law distribution of links. The thing that we will see comes out of power law distribution of links is that the last thing you get is fragmentation of attention. If anything, what you get is too much focus of attention on a very small number of blogs. But whatever that is as a second generation critique of democracy, it also demolishes the idea of fragmentation. So this is the second generation critique. Within the conversations about the blogosphere, Clay Shirky was the first who did this in a non-scientific way, talking about power law distribution of links implying attention. But you got people like physicists like Barabashi from physics talking about you can talk but no one will hear in his popularization book in Linked. You can see people from computer science like Natalie Glantz and Lada Adamic. You can see political scientists, more recently Matthew Hindeman. The basic idea, very little attention paid to politics at all. What is highly concentrated on a very small number of sites, and the mainstream media are particularly those. And in any event, whoever speaks in the blogosphere are themselves high-end elites. So you really don't get democratization. You just get a very small number of people accounting for most of the eyes. This is a very big critique, obviously. And this is the one that's also based in a new set of tools that looks at link analysis. And essentially what they find is that when you count the number of in-links into a site, that is to say the number of other sites linking into a given site, that distribution looks like a power law. So if a normal distribution looks roughly like on the left, with a small number of sites with very small number of links, a small number of sites with a very large number, and most in the middle, a power law distribution looks like the version on the left. That is to say, a huge number of sites with almost no links, and a tiny number of sites with a huge number of links and nothing in between. And you can see that the result of that would be a tiny number of sites that everybody sees and everybody else is obscure. You can talk cheaply and easily, but no.